Hey, little champs. Welcome to Peaceful Whisper. Once upon a time, in a quiet little meadow, there lived a young rabbit named Poppy. Poppy had the softest brown fur, ears that twitched with excitement, and a heart full of dreams. Of all the things she loved, Poppy adored watching Granny Hazel, the wisest rabbit in the warren, stitch together beautiful patchwork quilts. Each quilt told a story of warm summer days, crisp autumn leaves, and starry winter nights. Poppy longed to make a quilt of her own, one that would be the most beautiful quilt ever stitched in the meadow. One crisp morning, as the golden sun peeked over the hills, Poppy hopped into Granny Hazel's cozy burrow. The scent of lavender and freshly baked carrot muffins filled the air. Granny Hazel was sitting in her rocking chair, a quilt draped over her lap, carefully sewing each tiny piece together. Poppy's nose twitched with excitement. "Granny Hazel, will you teach me how to make a quilt?" she asked, her fluffy tail wiggling eagerly. Granny Hazel peered over her tiny spectacles and smiled. "Of course, my dear. Quilting takes patience and care. Are you ready for that?" Poppy nodded so hard her long ears flopped. "I'm ready." Granny Hazel handed Poppy a small basket filled with colorful fabric scraps. "Every quilt begins with a single piece," she said, placing a bright yellow square in Poppy's paws. "Now, take your needle and thread and sew along the edges." Poppy held the fabric tightly and poked the needle through. But as she pulled the thread, the stitch was uneven. She tried again. This time, the thread tangled. Again and again, Poppy tried, but her stitches were messy and her frustration grew. "This is so hard," she sighed, her ears drooping. Granny Hazel chuckled softly. "Every great quilter starts as a beginner, Poppy. Keep practicing, and soon your stitches will be as neat as a daisy in spring." Determined, Poppy spent the entire afternoon practicing. She pricked her paw once or twice, got thread stuck in her whiskers, and even stitched two pieces of fabric together in the wrong order. But she didn't give up. Days turned into weeks, and Poppy's pile of fabric scraps grew. She sewed and sewed, but no matter how hard she tried, her quilt didn't look as perfect as Granny Hazel's. Some squares were crooked, some stitches were too tight, and a few spots had tiny holes. Poppy sighed as she looked at her lopsided quilt. "It's not beautiful like yours, Granny Hazel." Granny Hazel gently stroked Poppy's ears. "Oh, but look at what you've done. Each stitch shows your effort. Every piece tells a story. Your quilt is growing just like you are, with patience, love, and practice." Poppy still wasn't sure. She wanted her quilt to be perfect, but she knew she had to keep going. One evening, Granny Hazel made an announcement. "The Meadow Quilt Festival is coming soon. Would you like to enter your quilt, Poppy?" Poppy's eyes widened. "But my quilt isn't perfect." Granny Hazel smiled. "A quilt is not about perfection. It's about the heart and story behind it." With renewed determination, Poppy worked harder than ever. She carefully selected her favorite fabrics, soft blues like the sky, warm oranges like autumn leaves, and deep purples like the twilight. She sewed each square with care, her stitches slowly improving. Finally, the day of the festival arrived. Poppy stood in the meadow, surrounded by quilts of all colors and patterns. Some were huge, some tiny. Some had perfect stitches, and some were patchy. But each one was special. When the judges stopped by Poppy's quilt, she held her breath. They admired its colors, the effort in each stitch, and the story it told. At the end of the festival, Poppy was given a beautiful golden ribbon, not for being perfect, but for having the most heartfelt quilt in the meadow. That night, as Poppy curled up under her patchwork quilt, she smiled. It was far from perfect, but it was hers. Every stitch held a moment of hard work, patience, and love. Granny Hazel kissed her forehead. "You see, dear, dreams are not made in a day. They are sewn together with effort, one stitch at a time." Poppy yawned and snuggled deeper into her quilt. As the moon shone softly outside, she whispered, "One stitch at a time." And with that, she drifted into the sweetest, coziest sleep, dreaming of new quilts and new adventures to come. Thanks for watching, champs. Just don't forget to like and subscribe.